I'm Luke Hartley, and this is the audio companion to the research paper entitled Reducing the Cost of Getting to Orbit. In that paper, we discussed the ISS and low Earth orbit in a little bit of detail, as well as some of the larger infrastructure ideas that could be built to improve the cost efficiency for getting to orbit. In addition, we're going to discuss a little bit more further about what has been done, in particular SpaceX, as well as where this research could be going in the future. Anything humanity plans on putting into space first has to achieve low Earth orbit, and that means reaching the ISS. In addition, if we can't build something that's capable of putting satellites into low Earth orbit and or resupplying or remanning the ISS, we really can't push on much further than that. Once we've got the low Earth orbit and ISS part figured out, then we can start worrying about construction of space infrastructure at that stage, pushing it out further orbits and or push it onto other planets. And that leads us to the advantage that the ISS and low Earth orbit can give us. In order to capitalize upon the advantages some of the proposed infrastructure can give us, a few new pieces of technology will have to be developed. This would include a functional vacuum tube that we could use over the distances prescribed. The vacuum tube would have to be devoid of air and be sealed at the end and not collapse under the negative pressure internally. This way we're not having to deal with the air pressure and resistance that we're fighting against to reach speeds in excess of the speed of sound, and we won't have to contend with the shock cone that we would normally in the atmosphere. That shock cone in close proximity to the electromagnetic track could cause irreparable damage to the infrastructure that we spend so much time and effort constructing. Apart from costly infrastructure projects, we could just use the ocean, and that is where the Sea Dragon comes in. Its largest advantage is its biggest weakness. The mass amount of lifting capability it has. Very rarely do we need to launch an entire space station in one trip, regardless of if it is more fuel efficient. Aside from fuel efficiency, one other way to reduce costs is to not dispose of as much of the rocket that we use. SpaceX has proven that they have found a way to do this by having their Falcon 9 booster re-land after use for them to refurbish and then relaunch on a subsequent trip. Has proven that they don't need to throw away their rockets, and this is the grounds for their new BFR rocket that they wish to produce and start launching as early as next year. The goal for that is to be able to move 500 tons into low Earth orbit, their new spacecraft, and that is the benchmark that they're setting for themselves. That way they can refuel spacecraft in orbit and then launch the refueled spacecraft onto the moon and to Mars. With the ability to refuel once in orbit, the fuel requirements for maneuvering around orbit as well as pushing on past don't have to be brought up with the original satellite or spacecraft. This will save us on launch costs for the initial launch vehicles, and then only the amount of fuel necessary can be transferred to that vehicle once it's in orbit. At this point now we have reusable and refuelable spacecraft. Next we can worry about is ensuring that we can make use of the orbit around Earth. That would include, just like the ocean, we're going to have to clean up the mess we've made over the past few decades. Cleaning up space debris could be a net, could be pushing things with lasers or with magnets out into space or down into atmosphere to be burned up before it reaches the ground. After we've mitigated the risk to future space travel, now we can concern ourselves with commercializing space. This includes lunar bases, asteroid mining, and the eventual colonization of Mars. As we continue to look forward to the future, we still need to look back at where we've been and the steps that we need to take to get to the future that we envision. Low Earth orbit is where we have the ISS. It's also where we've conducted our first space exploration and research assignments on the way to the moon back in the second half of the 21st century. And that's also where we're going to be launching any future missions out of once we get off the planet. Various technology and scientific theories have come a long way since we first started air travel, let alone space flight. Those have to be balanced against future expectations and the demands of commercialization of space, and who knows what the future will bring us. Infrastructure, either on the surface or in orbit. As competition continues to thrive in this new field of human exploration, we'll be able to see new technologies emerge as well as lowered costs as the various companies compete to be the most efficient. As more companies and their employees continue to compete for space, orbit, and the future of mankind, we will see ourselves as a civilization push forward, not just to the moon, not just to Mars, but maybe to future stars.